Emergency Relief Fund. So traditionally, I mean, historically within Springboard, that has been for artists who want to get a quick grant to be able to address any issues in their community, however you define that, that they want to create a creative response towards. So in the past, artists have created projects to address, for example, police violence. And so we have artists now who are proposing things like to address the uptick in anti-Asian racism that we're seeing, or disproportionate effects of this pandemic to communities of color, that sort of thing. So that is also part of our community emergency relief umbrella, and those are also $500 grants. But then beyond this, we're looking to we're going to be seeing a call for proposals within the next month, I would say by mid-June. Also, again, for $500, small amounts of money that we're calling community response projects. So what we're trying to do is encourage artists and culture bearers, creative workers to think about how you can use your creativity to address the epidemic of social isolation, for example, to help communities that are particularly vulnerable right now during this moment, and how we can sort of engage and through art and help uplift and reconnect people. So those could be projects that either happen in the virtual space, however you define that, or within a socially distanced public space. So they can be, performances, in outside of nursing homes, for example, or we were just brainstorming different ideas like poetry hotlines, that sort of thing. So it's really up to people's interpretation, but watch for those calls within a month or so through Springboard. And I'd say, yeah, those are the two ones I really wanted to highlight.
Wonderful, thank you. Eleanor, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. It's great to see you all today. And Jerome Foundation is a little bit different. We are an independent, private foundation. So our funding comes from a return on investments, and then that return is distributed through grant programs. And we are focused exclusively on early career artists. And our strategy in normal circumstances is through two programs. We support individual artists directly through a fellowship program, and then we support organizations that have programs for individual artists, early career artists. We also, in response to the immediate moment, have supported the emergency relief fund that Katie mentioned, and the small arts organization program through MRAC. Just trying to do whatever we can to get some immediate support out there. We have a board meeting coming up in June to discuss what can we do to help with the kind of recovery longer term. So as has been stated, things are in flux. The fellowship program, that the deadline just passed for that, for the next round of that program. It's a 2-year fellowship that provides artists $25,000 per year in flexible fellowship funding that they can use to create new work or to do artistic or professional development. And we fund across all disciplines. With the arts organization programs that we support, that also is in a moment of, all of those funds have been distributed to the arts organizations, but given what is going on, it's a little unclear. We gave organizations the option to use that funding just as general operating support to stay alive and to try to help that effort in this first year. So we have our ears to the ground and are trying to hear from artists and arts organizations, what's going on, how can we, be a support, how can we advocate, And that's kind of where we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, panelists, my next question for all of you is, what are some best practices that you would recommend to artists who are writing grants? And what are things that you wish you didn't see? What jumps out as exemplary?
I can start if you want. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge, I mean, I'm sorry, I get nervous on these calls, that I want to just publicly acknowledge MRAC and Jerome have been great supporters of our emergency relief fund. So thank you both. So I think that just as a grant writer and as someone who's sat on a lot of panels, especially around fellowships and grants, that clarity, as simple as that sounds, is the thing that I think can separate out people. Because if you think about it, you know, just really, really basic things, you know, as you're going through an application, can help the reviewer better understand what you're trying, the story that you're trying to tell about your work and yourself. Just the simplest things, like even, you know, page numbers, right, which seems pretty obvious, but those, or making sure you answer all of the questions, right, or even including the questions in, if you have space within the narrative, so that it's very, very clear as someone who's reading many applications potentially, that you can kind of do some of that work for people who are reading applications. Also, just going back to just, you know, what you learned, what I learned when I was in grade school about writing, you know, the answering the 5 W's, you know, who, what, where, when, why, about the proposal, the project that you're doing. Things that are very compelling, I think, for me as someone who has read grant proposals, is just making that case of why now, you know, in your career, why is this, what is the relevance of this project, either to you as an artist, how is it helping you grow, or what does it mean potentially to the community, or to what you're trying, the question that you're trying to grapple with. So those sorts of things are generally what make applications really stand out for me.
I'd agree with a lot of what Katie said. Clarity, especially in Next Step Fund. I read over 500 of these applications each year. You know, it is so important to not assume that your panelist or the reader of your application understands terms and intricacies of your art form. Trying to really be clear and almost take it to a really basic kindergarten level of like, this is what this type of music is, and this is what this instrument is. You might assume because you live it and breathe it and are in that community, but I find as a panelist as well as a grants administrator, it's when those questions come up, then the rest of the application is hard to you know, feel that same enthusiasm if you're not even sure what that instrument is or that art form that's being described. Again, like Katie said, answering all the questions is really important as well. Just really seeing the intent of each grant is very different, right? Eleanor, if you're applying to Jerome Foundation, that's more about artistic achievement, or at least you asked for work samples, Eleanor, I should say. And so we do want to see your artistic product, whereas Next Step Fund is not about that. It's more defining who you are as an artist. So you would write a very different grant for the State Arts Board or Jerome Foundation, and to kind of like what they say when you're applying for a job, to start with a new cover letter for each of those. For each grant, I do think that you probably need to start at least with a blank slate and copy and paste and bring things in, but it's not easy to just copy and say, oh, I applied to the State Arts Board, so I'm just going to use that same grant, or I'm not going to revisit what I applied for Next Step Fund last year, and I'm just going to submit the same grant. You can tell the freshness and the excitement that comes through with new projects and where you are personally right now.
And to add to that, I would say, don't be intimidated by calling and talking to the program staff at the foundations that you're applying to, or the grants that you're applying for. You know, one of the the things that is the most heartbreaking is, you know, getting an application that is not eligible. And because it takes so much time and energy, and, you know, the way we think about it, Jerome, is that the time you're spending on a grant is time you're not spending as an artist creating your work. And so we really we usually offer in-person information sessions. We had to convert all those to Zoom information sessions and Q&As. We offer, you know, you can schedule eligibility calls and ask questions about the application. And we've, you know, put all the recordings of that on the line, and encourage people to email or call us if you have questions. And that, I think, it is one of the most critical things, is just feeling like you have access to understand what's being asked and whether or not you're eligible to apply. I would also say that work samples are, you know, critically important for the Jerome applications. And just, you know, kind of thinking about that ahead of time. One of the things that panels have told us over and over again is that a highly edited kind of montage is not a good work sample. Panelists want to be able to see and hear your work as close to the live experience of it as possible. So just thinking about that and making sure that you have some really, you know, good quality recordings as you are developing material for grant applications is really important.
Thank you all. Before we open it up to some other people's questions, I have one more question that I would pose to the three of you, and that is about being eligible or submitting really successful applications year after year, or grant round after grant round, depending on what that is, because I know that's different for every funder. But how do I put this? What do you see are the successful things that make somebody submit successful grants on an ongoing basis?
And that's a tricky question because the Jerome Fellowship, most of the Jerome opportunities are you can only get it once. So there's not an option for ongoing. I think, you know, maybe the State Arts Board is one of the opportunities that you can apply for cycle after cycle. I don't know if there's a wait period if you get it, but I'm not sure about that. I can talk about, you know, what makes for a successful application just in general is some of what has, you know, been talked about already, is being clear. I think sometimes there's an anxiousness around writing grant applications, and it feels like you're having to do something that isn't you. But the more that you can talk about yourself and your work from an authentic and personal voice, I think that it makes for a more successful application than trying to sound like, you know, what your idea might be of grant speak. You know, the people on the panels at the Jerome Foundation are artists and leaders of arts organizations who know artists and know your work, and so they are going to want to hear from, you know, artists in your own artistic voice. So that kind of authentic communication about you and your work is really important.
Anyone else?
I also find this to be, I'm sorry. I also find this to be a hard question. So much is up to the panel too. We train our panelists. Our panelists are also artists and arts administrators. But you know, sometimes your application hits, we all come with bias or, you know, affinity for certain art forms or, you know, so it's hard to say that you can write a grant that's going to be successful over and over. There are people who just are really good at writing grants from all different artistic disciplines, right? They just are very self-aware. They come to it in a real strong way. And there are amazing artists who just don't really, they just, writing grants is never going to be something that really works. And so I do think it's, you know, and it's not something you can count on all the time. So I think it's kind of you have to decide for yourself if you want to put in that time and that effort, as Eleanor described, of taking away from your art and trying and working towards these grants. But there's also plenty of successful artists who don't play the grant game, if you want to call it, and are perfectly successful and you know, do great things too. So it's hard. It's a really hard work. Our Next Step Fund, we normally fund 7% of the applicants. That is, you know, amazing, amazing projects and artists, just we don't have the funds for it. And so it is. But the thing I love about Next Step Fund is talking to artists who actually don't get the grant, but come to me and thank me for the help or the assistance, and the process of thinking of a project or thinking of their career path or things like that have inspired them even without the dollars. Of course, the dollars are what they want and need, but there are some benefits to doing grant writing and thinking deeply about your practice and how you share that with the world that I think can be also beneficial. Obviously, you want a check that comes with dollars in your bank account as well. But there are benefits to thinking about your practice and sharing that.
And I just want to add that in addition to that self-awareness, I think that Bethany is talking about, that it was helpful for me when I was starting out as an artist, when I was not getting the grants initially, to sit on some panels if they're available. So, you know, I sat on some State Arts Board panels so that you can really see what stands out and why in how people talk about their work, which goes back to that self-awareness. And then, yeah, and then just getting feedback if it's possible about your grant, you know, so sitting, if you, again, through the State Arts Board, I know that they used to have, you could sit and listen to the panel talk about the grants. I don't know if they're still going to be able to do that, obviously, with the way things are, but that was also helpful too, to listen to how people are talking and what they're taking away from your proposal.
Well, along those lines, I listened to one yesterday, so they are doing some virtual panels, and the community is able to listen to those. So do we have any questions from our attendees? You're welcome to, if you want to, either raise your hand or go ahead and unmute yourself and just say your question. Okay, well, if you think of one, go, feel free to raise your hand and let us know that you have a question, or add it in the chat and we can ask it. But I did have another question, which was, you know, it's a time of sharing resources and sharing what the community is doing. So I just wanted to know if the three of you had any other COVID-19 related or crisis recovery related resources that you're aware of that you'd love to make sure that this group of artists are also aware of.
I would ask, well, Springboard for the Arts is doing a great job of kind of collecting those and putting them on the website. So Katie, would you talk about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanted to also mention that we have our own resources that Springboard is offering for artists during this time that could potentially be really helpful for folks. So we're still conducting work of art training, for example, technical assistance for artists. Just last night, actually, we had an online webinar that was addressing like websites and virtual navigating, I guess, this new virtual world, especially for people who are trying to get live work on online. So if you go to our website and you look at calendar of events, you'll see continuously updated information about some of the online workshops that we're continuing to offer. So we have one tomorrow on business skills for artists, and then on the 20th we have one on website skills. We also work with the Minnesota Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts Network, exploring the many legalities of this moment. And so we do occasional webinars. We have done them on, for example, navigating the fun world of unemployment insurance. So we'll probably do more of that. And so we also offer through that network 30 minutes of pro bono consultation through the Lawyers Network. So you can go to our website and either search that or find the link to that. That's through my colleague Andy Sturdivant. We're still offering one-on-one career consultations for artists, helping them again navigate this moment. So again, go to our website and check that out. And then I think in general right now, there's just an ongoing list, and like Bethany and Eleanor were saying, it's continuously changing, it feels like, of emergency relief funding, new opportunities. Just today, we found out that the Hennepin Counties is offering small business grants for individual entrepreneurs. So that includes artists. So if you look at the Hennepin County Small Business Grants page, they're up to $3,000, I think, for these grants. So things like that, just things that are continuously new pots of money sort of forming. I believe that, for the music community, the Twin Cities Music Community Trust is still operating as well. So just go to our website. There resources for Minnesota, regional resources, national resources for funding, as well as mental health, housing assistance, basic needs resources as well.
Thank you.
We quickly learned that Springboard had it under control, so we decided not to duplicate the resource list and instead direct everyone to Springboard because they're doing a great job. But yeah, that new, like Katie said, new pots of money keep coming up. They get depleted pretty quickly, but so it's just watching Springboard and other resources for opportunities so you can jump on those quickly. Our relief funds for groups were gone, and we have a super long list waiting for us to be able to replenish that. So it is about quick, these are our emergency and quick responses, so as fast as you can get applications in, I would advise that. So trying to be ready to go would be great.
We do have a couple of other questions from our attendees, so I'm going to read a couple of those to you all. Are there any specific types of projects that you commonly see getting funding?
I would say that the projects I see getting funded are the ones that go back to the grant criteria and what's being asked the most. So in Next Step Fund, it's the ones that really are very personal and really thoughtful about how it's going to push you to a next step in your career. The ones that don't do well, I can tell you right now, that are at the bottom of their list are if you were going to do a music festival, you're applying to Next Step Fund to get money to pay for the stage and to pay other artists to perform on a stage. That's not helping you. So for this grant program, you need to really think about what's going to benefit you and be able to speak to that. Same with our group grants that we have. Those are, again, those need to have that community engagement, so that festival might make sense there and your funds and everything. So knowing the grant criteria are the ones that do the best in my realm.
And I would echo that the grant criteria, we at Jerome have tried to just be very explicit about what the criteria are, and what the panel will use, how the panel will review those criteria. And so, when I first started in philanthropy 10 years ago, the review criteria weren't even listed in the guidelines, and now the review criteria are in the guidelines, and the criteria that the panel use are the same. So it's very, very transparent. But yeah, paying attention to those review criteria are key. But in terms of kinds of projects, it's very eclectic, and Jerome is supporting work in all genres of music and all types of intentions and forms. So it's pretty much all over the place.
Another question came up, and this may actually be a question for the Music Coalition to think about how we support musicians in the future, but I thought I'd throw it out to the panel as well. How does one find proper funds for recording a higher quality work sample? As an early career artist, I have several pieces written, but not many have been able to be effectively recorded due to the cost.
Well, in reading through some of the Next Step funds, I've seen people applying for equipment specifically to be able to document and better represent their work. So I think getting access to equipment seems to be a key piece of that. In all of the music programs and beyond that Jerome supports through our arts organization program, documentation of the work that's created through those programs is a consistent part of what is included in the program. So that if you're in the Cedar Commissions program, for example, documentation of the work that you create and perform is part of what you get as an artist in being in that program. So we've tried to kind of be intentional about providing that through the programs.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bethany. I saw you just unmuted.
Yeah. Eleanor is correct that the Next Step Fund is actually a great place to tackle some of those work sample questions. I often use that as an example that's a real barrier for you being the artist that you intend to be by not having a way to share your work and how you perform, or if you're a composer, if you don't have a work sample, right? So that often is a very compelling Next Step Fund project. And yes, you might be paying people to play the work that you composed or to be, accompanying you, but it's still coming back to benefit you, so that when you go to apply at Jerome or the State Arts Board or other places that do require work samples, that you have something to bring forward there. Of course, then we do, there's not enough, there's still, you might need to look, as Eleanor said, in other ways to also find ways to document, but that is a grant program that is intended to help bolster work samples. And so the Next Step Fund, we don't require work samples in the first round, but we do in the second round of review. And if you're state in your application that your barrier and your challenge is that you have poor work samples, the panel then in the second round expects to see poor work samples, right? It's not something that you need to quickly go out if you make it to a finalist round and get really good work samples. We're looking for that synergy between what you said. And so often we have people who are funded in our second round who have work samples that are not great, because that's exactly the barrier that they're hoping to alleviate through the project being presented.
And Katie, I wanted to direct this topic specific to Springboard. I know that we can't gather at Springboard's new facility on University yet, and I think it's still in the works a bit too, but I know that the previous Springboard offices had a great technical resource library and equipment and things, and I just wondered if you were able to talk a bit about what is coming at Springboard in terms of walk-in resources.
Yes, so we did, and we continue to operate an AV closet, and so we just at the end of February moved from our offices in Lower Town to a new space, the former site of Saxon Ford dealership on 262 University Avenue West in St. Paul. The interior is, the bottom floor of the interior is pretty much done. We also now will have access to a community space, which used to be their garage, their detailing space. And then the second floor, the intention is to turn that space into an expanded version of the resource center. So we'll still have AV materials that artists and organizations can check out and use. And then also we'll have that space for workshops. And hopefully, you know, be able to do a lot of the work of art workshops that we kind of have been doing out in the community at the new Springboard space. So yeah, that space is still, the upstairs is still in progress. As you can imagine, everything's kind of been delayed because of this situation that we're all in. So we're now looking to, we know that we're going to be closed through the summer at least, so through August, and then I'm sorry, not through August, up until August, so through July. And we're going to just kind of assess where we're at that point to see if there's potential to, you know, at least start maybe offering some things outside, some, you know, during the summer that can be socially distant, or just explore what that will look like for some of our public facing offerings. So still a little bit in flux, but yes, that will be available, you know, hopefully not too long from now.
Wonderful. Another question we had was about musical genre. Someone mentioned, and we were talking about all genres being funded, and someone said even progressive acoustic metal. But I think we could expand that a bit. That, you know, are we thinking like, do you see grants that come from all genres of music, and do they all, you know, does the wide array get funded?
Yeah, at Jerome, we do get applications from every genre imaginable, including acoustic metal. And, you know, we make sure that the panel that we put together will be receptive to, you know, and to all forms. And in the first round of the fellowship program, which was 2 years ago, we didn't have any acoustic metal that was funded, but in the program at the Cedar, there has definitely been support for that form. So we really want to embrace all forms of music, and we don't have any kind of defining line around, well, this is, you know, it's not all contemporary classical or, you know, boxed in by any kinds of boundaries around that.
I do think that goes back to a point I made earlier, though. It still would behoove you to explain your musical style, the way, you know, try to as best you can, just try to outline that. What's it sound like? What, especially if it's like my grant program that doesn't have work samples, describe what it sounds like, describe who would be on stage or what instruments are being used. Especially as we have diversified our panelists, and I would say diversify racially, ethnically, but art form, experience, immigrant, as we get a greater variety of people that are looking at your application, that there's not even a general understanding of classical music, because that comes from a Western European art form, right? And as we have different people, so everybody, no matter if you think that what you do is really clear and understandable, it really helps you to think that someone actually might not understand even what a violin is, right? Like to, I mean, they know what a violin is. I'm not saying our panelists don't, but you know, any assumptions you make that someone, oh, obviously knows that, I don't think that that helps you as we do a better job of bringing together people with really, really interesting backgrounds and experiences.
Yeah, and I will say that, so we have also at Springboard a residency program called Hinge Arts that takes place out of our rural office in Fergus Falls. Right now that has been momentarily paused, but I know I'd sat on a panel last year, and we had, for example, an applicant who makes very experimental sound-based music, but and this was a panel made of rural folks, right? People who maybe don't always interact with this type of work, but the way that it was talked about and sort of, and how the artist described and connected the work to the space, the rural places, and made it very relevant to that particular community, I think that was very compelling to the panelists. So again, to that point of just how you talk about the work can bridge that gap, I think, for some people.
Wonderful. Does anyone else have any questions for our panelists? Well, panelists, would any of you have any closing thoughts for the group that you'd like to share?
I would just say I really appreciated the listening session that was hosted by a number of different organizations in this time of, you know, rapid and radical change. And I know everyone is under a lot of stress. You know, we want to have our ears to the ground at Jerome Foundation to understand what is going on and what the needs are, and how we can be a support. Yeah, just know that we are listening.
I would just say thank you to artists for continuing to look to the future and to make work and share it. I've enjoyed things online and modified, and I know we're all, you know, anxious to be able to experience music and everything back in person again someday, but I love the opportunities and the efforts that you all are making to still enrich our lives. So thank you very much.
And I would echo that. As an artist and as someone who is in this community, I really appreciate the work and the recognition and the resilience of artists. And please sign up for Springboard's mailing list, because we're continuing as an organization to think about and explore how we can be responsive and help move the community, again, towards recovery, but also towards trying to rethink what might this opportunity be to make a difference, to change things, because we've seen that from this moment that there have been big gaps, that there are systems that have not been working. So we're just trying to think like what that might look like. So please sign up and stay connected with us as we're continuing to, the situation changes and we're just continuing to try to respond to it. But thank you all.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our three panelists for being here and sharing all of your wisdom. And I hope that everyone who's attending feels like they can also give program managers a call and talk through proposals as that comes up. And what has really struck me as I've kind of came back to the arts from a fundraising standpoint and talking to a lot of program managers was how dedicated they were to being audience members of the arts. And so I'm fairly certain that is true of the three panelists we have here today as well. So thank you all for being supportive of musicians. And yep, we have a few other things in the chat. I just want to point out that we have a survey, a feedback survey for the event today, and that our panelists have put their links, emails, and links to websites in there. So take a look at that. This panel is recorded and will be available later for people to access, as are the other Minnesota Music Coalition weekly workshops and panels that we've been holding most recently. And please stay on the lookout for more information about our upcoming Minnesota Music Summit, which will be happening at the end of June, and that will be an online event. We're really excited about it. So yes, thank you everyone, and have a really wonderful rest of your day. And I'm sure we will all connect again soon. Take care.